Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Singapore Injustice Podcast. I'm one of the co hosts, Kush, and this is Max, and today we're going to be taking a brief look into some of the injustices in Singapore for this series. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the third episode of the Singapore Injustice Podcast. We're hoping you've had a really nice break, and this is going to be like some sort of welcome back to school. And we're back at it with the podcast. And today we're going to start off with Max's article. So let's get into it.
So my article title is Singaporean insults Indians on social media over COVID-19. Minister of Home Affairs assures action. And I got this article from News Indian Express. It was published 3 days ago, so that would be 16th of October. Singapore. Action will be taken against the Singaporean man for allegedly insulting Indians on social media to deliberately stoke anger, unhappiness, and racial tensions, a senior minister said on Sunday. A man using the tag Sharon Liu 86 Twitter username posted tweets with derogatory terms to refer to people of South Asian descent, reported Channel News Asia. He tweeted that amidst the COVID-19 outbreaks, those who sit too close to each other are Malays, Indians, or foreigners, and not true blue Singaporeans. And that triggered an outrage in the city-state.
No, it's actually pretty interesting that the Singapore government would take action over something online.
Yeah, it's because Singapore's so small and very controlled, authoritative, very controlled, that they're capable. Because this is just one small instance of racial tension. And racial divide, and because of the smallness of the country, and the amount of control that the government has of the people, they can investigate into individual racial cases, which is pretty interesting. It's pretty cool, I think.
Like online, we have this United States culture where we think everything's freedom, but that's not the same in Singapore.
But this is good because they can track someone down like this in the U.S. or in other Western countries. When something like this happens, it happens with no repercussions. It just happens, and there's no one gets charged or anything.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
wait. Yeah. In this case, do you think that if the person didn't use derogatory terms and all that, like if they just stated their opinion about, South Asians, Malays, and foreigners,
I think
you think that would need to be?
I think that racism is when you marginalize and you generalize, you apply generalized statement on someone or a group of people based on what they look like or where they come from. So I think that even if the derogatory term, which we'll talk about later, wasn't used, I think that would still count as racial, like a racial offense.
Yeah.
Because he does say, all the people that sit together are either Malays, Indians, or foreigners, and that's you marginalize and you generalize everyone in those groups to be always disobeying the law, which is obviously wrong, and therefore I think it's racist. Okay, so Sharon Liu, who posted that Chinese women do not want to sit next to smelly quote apunene, is neither Chinese nor female. The minister said that, quote, some weeks ago there were nasty posts by one Sharon Liu at Sharon Liu 86, quote, end quote, insulting Indians, saying COVID-19 is the Apu Nene. That term is considered a derogatory term for people of Tamil origin. Virus. So Sharon Liu said COVID-19 is the Apu Nene virus, and how smart Chinese women do not want to sit next to, quote, smelly Apu Nene.
You don't need to say it that many times. I've actually never heard of that.
Me neither, but I think it's a Singaporean thing because we're foreigners. I think that we don't experience that as often.
Yeah.
And also just the places that we are, I think it's less rural in terms of Singapore.
Mhm.
This was done deliberately by Sharon to stoke anger, unhappiness, and racial anger and unhappiness, and to evoke racial tension. And the Home Minister said that action will be taken. The police said they were investigating a 34-year-old man for, quote, promoting enmity between different racial groups. The police received a report about offensive content against Indian migrant workers on April 18th. So it happened. So this is another case of it happening.
Yeah, like last couple podcasts we talked about migrant workers. We see it again. Offensive content against them. Usually it's not this explicit though, but either way they both are pretty intense.
Yeah. Through investigations, CCTV footage, and police cameras, through CCTV footage and police cameras, the authorities were able to identify the man. They said that preliminary investigation revealed that the man is believed to be involved in 2 other cases involving offensive tweets. So this guy was obviously so the police, they claimed that, and this guy is obviously, he's a repeat offender. It's a behavior.
And to add to that, this situation is it's just one case, but it also shows us about the injustice we face online, that you can't really hide behind a screen, because obviously this guy was caught, and the anonymity that we think we have online isn't really true, that anyone can catch us if we're doing something wrong.
Especially with the Singaporean government,
exactly,
who do focus lots of materials and lots of effort into catching people that do things like this. I think that especially in Singapore, online anonymity doesn't really exist.
But I think that's a good thing though, because it keeps us at our best all the time and makes sure that we are as respectful as we can be.
Exactly, and also don't forget that for some people, they don't think that being so, because this is very controlling, and not many cultures are okay with that. In Singapore, it's a cultural fact that it's common for there to be so much control. But I think that in other countries, for example, I know that I come from the Netherlands, and I know that in the Netherlands this would be less than accepted, because we value privacy a lot.
Yeah.
And I think it's also interesting that in Singapore this goes, and this is allowed, and this happens with so much control, and the police always can always know what you're up to. Not that they do, but they can always find out. I think that's pretty interesting how that happens here, because it's cultural. It's it's part of the way Singaporeans are brought up. They've accepted the fact that when, for example, this guy, Sharon, it goes by the name of Sharon, but it turns out it's a guy. This guy, he thought that he was anonymous, stupidly, because we all know that it's not anonymous. He thought that he was able to post all these messages anonymously, but he didn't, and that's how he got caught.
I think it's also interesting how many likes he's getting on each tweet.
Yeah, because we have the tweet in front of us right now.
Yeah, it's like a couple hundred likes for something that's actually racist. It sort of shows how people can band together online, and even if what they're believing in is injustice, they still go together, groupthink.
It's like what's it called? It's like the what I mean to say is, when people feel ashamed of thinking something, communicating that idea and getting into communities relating to that idea online is often a solution for them. It's because they don't actually have to be physically seen with the people, and there's no physical community, so there's a lack of sense of shame. I think that if you were to be very racist, let's say hypothetically I was very racist, and I wanted to be with other people that are racist, I think that I would have too much of a sense of shame if I were to do that physically. If there was like a physical group, like a supremacist group or something,
Yeah.
that involves like you might become shameful of what you're doing, but online, because you're hidden behind a screen and behind a website and behind an account that you can use that may be anonymous, you're able to connect with other people with less of a sense of um, less of a sense of what's the word less of a sense of shame.
Yeah.
I think that, like, if I were to think such terrible thoughts, it would be easier to connect to people online,
Mm.
and that's exactly what's happening here. So Sharon, the account name Sharon, actually a guy, posted multiple tweets and other stuff that is racist, and he got support online, and these are all people that don't want to voice their opinions, but they're okay with accepting other people. These like Sharon's tweets.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We sort of see these cases with probably a bit older generation. Like he's 34 years old, so I'm assuming when he was in school he didn't have any of those digital literacy lessons that we have today, which would probably make it seem better and more easier to like be respectful online.
I agree. I do think it's something generational. I think that um, the older people nowadays aren't as much able to comprehend the dangers of the internet, whereas I think that we've grown up literally consuming digital media our whole
Yeah.
lives, and with that comes a sense of like an automatic sense of um, knowing how to treat others online, and how to be mindful of our online use of technology. Yeah. Okay. So last month, here. So, if found guilty, this man of promoting enmity between different groups on grounds of race, the man could be jailed for up to 3 years, fined, or both. 3 years jail for a simple racist tweet. And I completely agree with that, but I think
that's
it's
insane.
I think that's insane that that's possible, because if that happened all over the world, jail population would skyrocket. Anyways, at the time when we needed the nation to stand as one, acts that sow racial discord cannot be condoned. We will continue to take a tough stand against those who seek to stoke community tensions with multiracial Singapore, said Julius Lim, Assistant Commissioner of Police, Commander of Bedok Police Division. Migrant workers make up the bulk of COVID-19 cases in Singapore, with the outbreak affecting several foreign workers living in crammed dormitories, as we discussed.
Last couple episodes.
Yes. Last month, Shanmugam spoke out against the forum letter published in Chinese Daily, questioning if foreign workers were to be blamed for the rise of cases in Singapore, pointing to their eating habits and alleged lack of personal hygiene. So this is another case of racism that I think is relevant to mention, because it's very similar. According to media reports, the minister later said that these sentiments were showing underlying racism. I think that this less explicit case of racism is, in my opinion, a lot less sensitive, because here they pointed out the eating habits and the alleged lack of personal hygiene, and then my rebound question is, maybe their eating habits different to yours, and maybe their hygiene different to yours, but why do you think that is? Maybe it's because they earn a few cents per hour. If I earned a few dollars per day, I wouldn't be able to afford deodorant like I do, right? I think that is very insensitive on the part of Chinese Daily. Yeah.
But I mean, it's not like it's not true. But I'd say there's obviously a fine line being insensitive and being like factual. And I mean, we don't want to get into those controversies, but
I think that it's important. Yes, I do think that um, migrant workers have are hygiene wise maybe less accepted in society simply because they don't have the means to
Yeah.
smell good on a day, because they honestly it doesn't really matter if you're working all day and you're sweating all day.
Yeah.
But I think that on itself is a statement that obviously is not nice to make, and it might be truthful. It might not even. It doesn't. I'm not saying that that applies to everyone, but I think that the worst part about this is that they blame COVID-19 on people that can't afford hygiene because their hygiene is bad.
Yeah.
And I think that's the worst part about this case of racism. Also, that they mentioned that that all migrant workers have bad hygiene and all migrant workers have bad eating habits. I think that's also very false.
You have to make the distinction between whether or not it's their fault or it's their choice. So,
Exactly.
and in this topic, let's get into some of the. I mean, there's obviously not a lot of CAS opportunities for this in particular, but we talked about some last podcast. So this time we're going to talk about some things we can do to make some things that we can do proactively to keep in mind while online, because I'm assuming, I mean, obviously this episode is going to be a bit more about the online things that we can do.
Because COVID-19 has restricted movements.
Yeah, so it's
So,
actually so much. It actually makes a lot of sense because COVID-19. Now we're all growing online, especially these past. I'd say almost a year now, which
It
is
feels like a year. It's not almost a year. It's only October, so
yeah.
it's like 9 months, 8 months. No, 8 to
Started
seven,
in
eight,
like
7,
March,
8 months.
right?
Exactly. So, yeah. So I think that for CAS opportunities, this topic of racism is pretty. It doesn't really apply. However, I can say that both. If you, I think that the CAS opportunities for, like surrounding migrant workers,
Yeah,
they still
them-
exist. They are the ones that I mentioned last time.
Yeah,
Although not directly related to this racism topic, I think that they might be indirectly related, and I think that they're still good to mention. But also, aside from like CAS opportunities, I think that one of the things that we should all strive to do is just more mindfulness. To
Yeah.
think about what is a choice and what is controlled and what is uncontrolled.
yeah, and like obviously everything that you do that is good for the community this couple of years, it doesn't have to be CAS. Like there's so much that you can do that doesn't necessarily translate into being CAS, but it actually means a lot for our communities, and especially when online, it's really important to, like, especially these couple months, we've also been seeing some racial injustice come into our social medias, when and we have to keep in mind that we have to be as respectful as possible, and it's not a CAS thing to do, but when you're online, it's really important to make sure that you're not being controversial. That
Not
I
being
guess
racist.
yeah, not being racist. That
Not being mean or disrespectful to anyone.
exactly.
And that's just, it's a general. It should be, and I hope that this story and this podcast, in a way, shows you how even saying something that you might not even think is racist or might not even think is derogatory or mean to any group of people might be mean or derogatory or racist to any group of people. I think that hopefully this podcast and this story that I just explained helps all the listeners to this podcast realize that racism exists even in the controlled society we live in Singapore. That racism doesn't care where you come from. Racism doesn't care where you post it or where you spread it. I think that racism will always catch up to anyone that engages in it.
Yeah, and in like our sheltered environment for us international school students, like obviously we've heard it time and time again about being respectful online, all the digital literacy lessons we've had, but and obviously even I have these thoughts where I've heard it so many times, I don't want to hear it again. But you have to understand how important it is, especially in our lives at this stage where whatever you say online, it will stay there forever. There is nothing that you can delete off the internet, and in the future, if anyone comes across like things you've done in like 10 years ago,
Exactly.
if someone comes across
some-
it, it's horrible.
If for any reason being racist isn't enough of a discourager of this behavior,
Yeah.
then keep in mind that universities and job applications and like checkups like those, they do go through your internet history
Exactly.
and your accounts and what you've said to see if you've been engaging in things like this. Exactly. So it's important to remember that if being racist isn't enough of a discourager, which I doubt it isn't, that it's also important just because for digital like etiquette
Yeah.
and digital and because nothing is ever deleted online. It's crucial to remember that you might be held accountable even 5 or 10 or 30 years after it's been done.
Yeah, and it's becoming more and more common, especially in like one of the biggest examples we have today of this culture, like the cancel culture, is on YouTube, where creators that have done some offensive skits like 10 years ago are now facing the consequences. And I mean, it's a whole other argument whether cancel culture should be a thing, but like just
It
stay
definitely has
respectful all
something
the
to do with
time.
each other. It definitely has something to do because we see like many like internet personalities that get held accountable for things that they did a while ago. Whether or not that is right and just, I'm not going to get into, but it happens, and that's all that we need to communicate to the listeners because it happens, and we all need to take charge to make sure that we don't get put in a position that we are held accountable for something that's racist or disrespectful to others online.
Exactly.
Kush, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Have you ever personally experienced racism?
I don't know. Like, I haven't faced any explicit racism, but I'm sure everyone has these cases where you don't know.
Implicitly that people think something about you or people mention something about you that you don't know is driven by race or driven by anything else.
And like you apply for something and they don't give it to you because you're of some certain race. You're never gonna know, but
okay, so
it might have been a thing.
So you don't have an actual case of racism.
No, nothing comes to mind. What about you?
I have in Singapore, which is pretty fascinating. It's pretty interesting, but we're not gonna get into that this episode. I might share that experience. I've shared one of those experiences with you before.
Yeah.
About the train. I think in the last one or two episodes, but I've been subject to racism on a more explicit level before. That I think we'll get into next episode or maybe in our final episode.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume you might. I don't want to say anything certain, but I'm thinking that you might be experiencing more like separation or like not as extreme as racism, but like some sort of racism than me, because in Singapore, obviously, Indians are a higher population than people from the Netherlands, so
Or like foreigners in general.
yeah.
Like I think for racism wise, I think it's very interesting. So many of us have that gov.sg subscription thing with like every single day you get the different cases and stuff like that, and also just in news sources about COVID, they mentioned how many cases there are.
Yeah, community cases.
I think it's very that too. So they mentioned migrant worker cases and community cases.
Yeah, so
that
are
is
migrant
that
workers
seems to
not
me
the community?
That seems to me to be very just might not be racist, but it's like unnecessary.
Like,
And something else is also, have you noticed that they say when there are cases in the community,
one single
PR,
yeah,
work pass and dependence pass.
yeah.
So people on a work pass or dependence pass aren't Singaporean.
I mean, Yeah, but
Yeah. So PR, you're Singaporean.
yeah,
On a work pass or dependence pass, either you work in Singapore or you're dependent on someone that does. Like me, I am on a dependent pass. I think that exactly like why does that divide necessarily need to occur? Why? Who the hell cares?
yeah. Maybe
Who
this
cares if it's
divide-
now if it's a Singaporean or if
Yeah.
it's an American that lives in Singapore? I think that's
Maybe-
I think it's an interesting case of just
Maybe the categorization that we see is like started off by the government.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's what I'm curious
exactly.
about because, and also you have you heard about the wave of like disrespect and for foreigners, if you were to apply for a job in Singapore, that for example I know a story of my mother that my mother applied for a job
Yeah.
and she was like she already talked with with like the HR of the company and everything was figured out until she had to go to the official Singaporean like portal for like employment portal
Yeah.
where they had to like where she had to officially say that I will go now to work for this company. And then when she filled in her work pass numbers and her whole passport number and everything, when she filled everything in, she said unavailable. This job is only available for Singaporeans.
Wow.
And I think that like I think that especially because of COVID, it has driven a divide between people that come here to get rich, allegedly, these foreigners like you and I, and Singaporeans.
Yeah.
I think that's come up more during COVID. I think that's mentionable. Not that it's directly relevant, but I think it's mention worthy.
Obviously, that's a bit more of an explicit case, but I have also an implicit case where, like, I live in the Jurong west side, so a lot of, you know how a lot of the Caucasian people, they're like in Holland, around Holland Village,
Yeah,
right?
Holland Village and Holland Road and
Yeah.
Bukit Timah.
Usually, like, if I go out with my friends, it's usually not towards the Jurong west side because here's usually just Indians and local people that live here, so I've noticed that people stare a lot when it's not people of Asian descent that are walking around. Like, let's say someone.
Not people of Asian descent.
Yeah. So if
So let's say if like a white guy with blonde hair walked around there.
yeah, people would like stare. So that's why it's a bit awkward when you're not in the Holland Village area, especially if you're a Caucasian person. Like, have you ever seen anyone that's like?
No.
Yeah, exactly. It's really interesting. So, I guess that'll wrap up this episode. And as Max talked about job opportunities, racism in job opportunities, we're going to be focusing on that for the next podcast. So, stay tuned for that. It'll be coming out like 2 weeks from the release of this one. So, we do bi-weekly podcasts.
Bi-monthly.
Yeah, my bad. No, bi-weekly. Because once every 2 weeks.
Is that what that is? Okay, sure.
I'm not sure.
Whatever.
Well, we'll end it off there. Thank you so much for listening. And if you can't listen to the entire thing, obviously we make segments, so you can listen to the shorter versions of the videos. Both are very interesting.
And if you don't have the whole stretch of 28 minutes to watch a podcast, that's completely understandable. Just go onto our channel and you'll see all the other snippets of our podcasts.
Yeah.
And the different episodes, so just go on there so you can see snippets for cast opportunities and interesting parts and stuff.
Yeah, we've made playlists for each episode, and you'll see the playlist number 3 when this podcast comes out.
Thank you so much for listening, and that'll be all.